Hey, how's everyone doing? My name's Ron Young, and back in the 1990s, one of my pastor, Bruce Linscheid, out in California, told me this interesting story. He told me that he went to the swap meet to look for a necklace for his wife, and he wanted to find a little cross pendant. So he goes to the swap meet, and he asks the person working there to show him some crosses, and so she dutifully found some nice chains and a couple things, and she says, "Which do you want? Do you want a plain one or one with a little guy on it?" My pastor, of course, was taken aback by this. Like, how do you not know that this is who that little guy is? So he asked that question, and she had no idea. And so he told her that this was Jesus, and she had no real understanding about who Jesus was or why he would be on a cross. And I think, here it is, 2025, and there are a lot of people who don't know who Jesus is. They've maybe heard a lot about Christianity, but they're not certain about what Christians believe. They don't know who Jesus is. There are many who grew up in the church and have perhaps left. And part of it is they like me. I think when I grew up in the church, I knew that Jesus had died for me, for my sins, but I didn't really know much about Jesus. In fact, the things I thought about Jesus was that he was kind of maybe a wimpy guy, or, some sort of hippie. And I really had no interest in following Jesus or being like Jesus. I just I didn't understand. I think what I took from church was more of a moralism about, um, don't do this, don't do that. Um, still thankful that Jesus died for me, but I really didn't understand it all. I meet people like this all the time, and I think of younger generations who have, in our time right now, of a lot of anxiety, a lot of feeling alone, looking for meaning in life, looking for some better way to live. And I think, on my part, I think it would be very crucial for you to know Jesus. So I'm starting this podcast called "Behold the Man." I think a lot of people have all sorts of questions about morality, about the purpose of life, about everything, and often what happens is it ends up, as we talk about Christianity, it turns to more of the moral questions. It turns to proofs for God's existence, those types of things. But the reality is when you encounter Jesus, when you get to know Him, when you understand what He did, what He was like, um, all those answers become clear. We're not seeking from a place of skepticism and doubt, but one of faith, because we know who Jesus is and what He did. Then everything else becomes clear. If I go up to you and I ask you, I want you to sacrifice all your ideas of happiness and follow Jesus, but you don't know who Jesus is, that sounds ridiculous. You'd want some sort of proof or some sort of confirmation. And I think really that's not the place to begin. I think the place to begin is to allow yourself to contemplate, to behold the man, Jesus Christ. And once you understand Jesus and his teachings, and and come to faith, then understanding comes naturally, much easier. And the willingness then to follow, to um, give yourself to it, is um, is not merely some sort of thing like pulling your teeth. It becomes the desire of your heart, to pursue Jesus and to seek His kingdom. It is a life that is, it doesn't make life easier, but it does make it good. And it doesn't make the ugliness of our world go away, but you understand the beauty of Christ and his kingdom. And that beauty can manifest itself within our own lives and our own homes and our own households and our own communities. And I think it can be seen and felt. There's a beauty in it. Um, and I think we all yearn for it. You might be wondering about the title of this podcast, and it's called "Behold the Man," and it comes from a section in John's Gospel. And my podcast is going to begin um, weekly, examining Jesus through the lens of John's Gospel. So we're going to go through the whole book of John. It might take some time. I don't have it laid out as much. I think a lot of this is going to be free flowing, me reading the text and talking about it. I invite you also to ask questions. I'd love to answer questions. If you have questions, just ask them, and I'm happy to answer them. But here it is from John, and it has to do with him hanging on a cross. So he gets accused by the religious leaders of the day of being a blasphemer because he claims, get this, he claims to be divine. And this is why I say that if you examine him and you come to that conclusion that Jesus really is who he says he is, that is the Son of the living God, it makes everything fall in place. Either he's a liar, he knows he's not God, but he claims to be. He's a lunatic. He really is crazy and thinks he's God, even though he's not. The only real option is that he is who he says he was, and that deserves our attention. So I invite you to come and behold the man. From John chapter 19, Pilate, he was the governor of Jerusalem in Jesus' day, a Roman governor. Pilate took Jesus and flogged him, and the soldiers twisted together a crown of thorns and put it on his head and arrayed him in purple robe. They came up to him saying, "Hail, King of the Jews," and struck him with their hands. Pilate went out again and said to the crowd, "See, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no guilt in him." So Jesus came out wearing a crown of thorns and a purple robe. Pilate said to them, "Behold the man." When the chief priests and the officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify him, crucify him." And so Jesus was nailed to a cross and died. But we know 3 days later, he rose again from the dead. And that makes all the difference in the world to all who believe. So I invite you to come and investigate. Behold the man, Jesus Christ.